We're on the 100 right now. Last gold zone movement was off of P. Well, we seem to have a pretty strong low. The low of the day today is the low of the day yesterday. That is much uglier than yesterday. Yesterday was much prettier. I always miss the fucking nice movement. Every time I'm gone, there's always super good movement. Could we be correcting? Could we be correcting? Very possible. Price has moved about 3,700 pips today. I don't know. We got Michigan consumer sentiment in about half an hour. Price on perp. This news is in 20 minutes. So we got some rejection here. This price continuing under perp. What are we doing? Strong sell-off. Both the indices are going in opposite directions. Some pretty big volume. So there's discontinuation. At the low of the day, that price needs to break. Yes, overall we are in a downtrend. $1,300 pips. That's a pretty big candle. Michigan sentiment is in 16 minutes. Damn. Big risk. $1,500 pip. $1,500 pip, and the bottom of the day. Bottom of the day as resistance. Bottom of the day is resistance or support. 1,600 pip risk. Wrist. So we're at the low of the day. This level is the low of the day. This is the only thing I'm worried about, price not breaking. I got 12 minutes till Michigan sentiment. I'm being nice and patient. It's a big support right up here off level. That's what I was afraid of. Just gonna wait for things to play out. 10 minutes left till Michigan consumer sentiment. Horses in the stable. Alright, so I was staying underneath perp. Alright, making the continuation down. Just tried to there. Oh. We got 8 minutes till news drops. This low of the day, this level is previous day's low as well. I need to find my fingernail clipper. Horses in the stable. looking like we want to continue, but unless we break this low, it will be tough for me to believe anything. Big support up here from the bottom of the day. Horses in the stable. We got news popping off in 5 minutes.
This is Tokyo. It is by far the largest and most populated city in the world, with over 37 million people living there. At the same time, to many,
and of course mesmerizing alleyways are incomparable to any other major city. Tokyo is simply an outlier. But how did it end up like this? How did Tokyo become such an incredible city and avoid many of the city planning mistakes that haunt typical major cities? Well, contrary to popular belief, the origins of its city design doesn't start from its rebuilding period after the city was destroyed during World War II, but rather centuries earlier. Back in the early 17th century, during the beginning of the Tokugawa period, Tokyo, then called Edo, was chosen to become the de facto capital of the government. With this came a new formal system of city planning. The division of land was relegated to two drastically different classes. The samurai classes, characterized by low density residences with significant green spaces, and the commoner areas, which were high density mixed use areas following a grid like schematic. This planning protocol
So we got less than a minute till this news drops. So far, all we know is we supported off of the low of the day, and we rejected perp. There's that volume. The Michigan sentiment volume. We got price rejecting that top right now, that perp. So is perp stronger and will come down, or are we still just arranging here? Price rejecting. Kind of in a wedge. So we got price rejecting perp and this downtrend, but there's still some volume to the top here. So yeah, we're really just stuck in this 2000-ish pip range. That's price trying to get above perp. So another rejection to the top.
Schematic. This planning protocol, designed to regulate urban expansion and designate areas based on class, combined with growing population pressures, forced the commoner areas to optimize the use of space, resulting in efficient gridded streets throughout Tokyo, known as cho blocks. Each block was measured to be around 128,000 square feet and contained an average of 300 people. Finally, true to their feudal nature, many of the streets that connected them were narrow and angular, a design that sought to restrict enemy forces from storming the political capital. This system of spatial configuration proved to be incredibly distinct from the traditions of the West. In Tokyo, the urban space was a patchwork of discontinuous neighborhoods, rather than following rigid, centralized grid systems. And in many ways, the dense, mixed-use development and gridded street networks seen in parts of Tokyo today can be traced back to this period. Commoner areas became commercial districts, while samurai areas became residential and administrative areas. If you look at this map of the business district Nihonbashi in 1888 and present day, the grey circles represent different chos, and the grid block pattern can still clearly be seen. The next major influence on Tokyo's design came with Japan's modernization in the late 19th century. As the country opened up to the world, Tokyo began adopting an
So we still got Price here kind of dancing on perp end of level. We've got things tilting down, but yeah, there's a little wedge formed here.
World, Tokyo began adopting elements from Western capitals like Paris and London, from paved roads and sidewalks to sewer systems and urban boulevards. But it wasn't until the 1919 Tokyo City Planning Act that these ideas were formally codified into national urban planning policy. To many historians, this was the time when Tokyo actually did try to emulate Western cities. But as we'll soon see, their geography, culture, and urban history ended up making that very difficult, and Tokyo emerged as a unique hybrid. Anyways, these were the first national laws to systematically regulate city planning processes anywhere in Japan, and remained in place until their updates in 1968. While much was included in it, the two main things to look at are the zoning code and the framework for land readjustment. The zoning code introduced under the Act was far more flexible than those seen in Western cities. While zoning in places like the United States often aimed to strictly separate land uses, frequently with class or racial motivations, Japan's zoning system was hierarchical and inclusive by design. Only 4 broad zones were initially defined, and they allowed for a mix of uses within residential areas, including small shops, restaurants, and offices, so long as they didn't pose any serious nuisance risks. This flexibility helped preserve Tokyo's vibrant, walkable neighborhoods, where commercial and residential uses coexist in close quarters. Land readjustment was the other key planning tool adopted from Western practice, but uniquely adapted to Japan's densely parceled and privately owned urban land. Rather than expropriating property, land readjustments temporarily pooled together individual plots, reconfigured them for better roads, infrastructure, and public space, and then returned the land to the original owners, often with slightly reduced area but higher value. Now, from here, this is where we get to the two things that changed everything for Tokyo as a city, forever. The first was the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake. It destroyed over half of Tokyo and nearly all of Yokohama just south. Over 100,000 people died, and approximately 2.5 million people were left homeless from it. Then, 2 decades later, came the firebombing of Tokyo in World War II, starting technically in 1942, but really ramping up from 1944. Over 60% of Tokyo was destroyed by the end of the war, with 50% of this damage coming all on one night, March 9, 1944. It was the single most destructive aerial raid in human history, with over 100,000 people perishing. 2 tragedies, almost back to back, meant that Tokyo had no choice but to rebuild, from the ashes with a blank canvas. But this is where things get interesting. Because what if I told you that the blank canvas Tokyo urban planners had to start over with wasn't actually that blank at all? See, while it's popular to believe that Tokyo ended up so amazingly because they were able to start over from scratch and avoid many mistakes, things didn't work out like this at all. According to renowned professor Andre Sorensen's The Making of Urban Japan, Japanese urban planners and architects did have ambitious plans for what post-war Tokyo could become. Ishika Hideaki, the director of planning of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, proposed a bold vision to fundamentally restructure Tokyo and transform it into a network of smaller, self-contained sub-cities with green belts in between. Planners proposed a state-enforced 15% land contribution from all property owners to help build those public spaces. New zoning codes would have cleanly separated residential and industrial areas. It was the kind of modernist master plan you might expect from a country rebuilding after a catastrophe, inspired directly by modern European planning ideals. But none of it happened. Let me explain. Post-war Japan was bankrupt, with multiple other cities like Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Osaka, Yokohama, and many more requiring rebuilding. The government simply didn't have the financial capacity to undertake such a radical reconstruction in Tokyo. They also didn't have the authority needed to enforce any of its ambitious projects. After the war, remember, Japan was occupied by American forces for years with limited sovereignty. They were at the mercy of American priorities. And just like how urban planning has seemingly never been a priority in America, it definitely wasn't at the time. Any massive public works plan required approval by the Supreme Commander for the Allied powers, but all these large-scale reconstruction schemes were largely discouraged, viewing them as too symbolic, potentially nationalistic, and less urgent. Stability was key. So not only was there not any money for it, but the authority wasn't either. What this means is because city planners weren't able to control the city, residents took charge instead, rebuilding their properties with limited guidance or constraint. This level of local autonomy wasn't necessarily new in Japan. It was rooted in rural traditions of self-governance, where villages relied on informal mutual aid networks like yui, a system of cooperative labor and communal resource management to get things done. Those same habits carried over into Tokyo as the formal institutions were weak. As a result, instead of Tokyo having some rigid top-down master plan, its absence allowed for a more organic, multi-centric, and diverse urban form to develop, preserving many of Tokyo's traditional alleyways known as yokochos, block structures, and pre-war land use patterns. So there was no real post-war shift in Tokyo's pattern of development, but rather an acceleration of a developmental process that had started decades ago, which implied the merging
Small
of
hammer breaking up.
landscapes in an organic way. This was the key to everything. It was essentially the failure to implement a master plan for Tokyo that allowed its uniqueness to flourish and retain
Still at
aspects of
perp,
its
rejecting
original
perp
urban
now
layers.
though.
It was a blessing in disguise, really. If you compare this to cities like Berlin, its east and west halves were rebuilt as ideological showcases of socialism versus capitalism.
See if we get the rejection
or
here.
London, where post-war reconstruction was shaped by national pride and social reform under the Abercrombie plans. Tokyo just had freedom. If we wanted to imagine what Tokyo would look like had it been formally developed, then I think Seoul is actually a good example of this. And it's not to say Seoul isn't incredibly designed, because it definitely rivals Tokyo in many aspects. But when it was destroyed in the Korean War, it was rebuilt in the complete opposite way, through centralized, government-led urban transformation, resulting in a significantly different city. It's important to note, though, that Tokyo still somewhat resembles what the planners originally envisioned, or at least wanted to do. As I said before, they wanted to make it a multi-core city instead of having one dominant hub, which ended up happening as Tokyo is made up of 23 major districts, or wards as they're known. But we'll get to that soon. The difference just lies in intended design versus emergent outcome. Of course, as time went by, Tokyo has modernized quite a bit. If we're to look at the decades since post-occupation ended in 1952, especially during Japan's economic miracle period from 1955 to 1973, Tokyo evolved drastically. For example, everyone knows about how incredible their metro is. To many, it's the best in the world. I mean, just look at this map of it. Almost 2.4 billion people ride it annually. It was during this time period that it made the most progress. Back in the 50s, Tokyo's subway system was still very limited, with just the Ginza line and the newly completed Marunouchi line being in operation. Things could have gone totally different here. As the automobile industry was starting to grow worldwide, city planners could have pivoted Tokyo to adapt a more car-centric infrastructure. But they didn't. The government chose to invest heavily in public transportation instead, because Tokyo, as it is today, was an already densely populated city with the narrow street patterns. It had gone from a population of 3.5 million to 9.7 million in just 15 years. Land was too expensive and scarce for wide roads and parking lots, so they had to use space more efficiently. It was in 1959 they were announced as the hosts for the 1964 Summer Olympics. This is where their transportation infrastructure really took off. The Hibiya subway line and the Tokaido Shinkansen bullet train
Big support.
connecting Tokyo and Osaka were opened just in time for the event. Today, they have a combined daily ridership of over 1.6 million people. Of course, the city still did have to modernize for the rise of the automobile. After all, it was becoming a global city. The iconic Shuto Expressway was built for this purpose. Its construction prioritized national image and functionality over local integration, built through the city, not for it. During the Japanese economic miracle, as millions of people migrated from rural areas into the developing urban industrial areas per year, the automobile industry at this time began to skyrocket, as cars were produced for a domestic market for the first time. Car ownership increased by 600% between 1960 to 1970. Nevertheless, as Tokyo adapted more for cars, featuring less connected streets than normal, its connectivity was still high by global standards. But as Tokyo entered the 1970s, the limits of this rapid reactive growth started to show. The city was facing severe pollution, housing shortages, and rising land prices. In response, Japan introduced several key planning laws. The 1968 New City Planning Act, which is the most recent one, replacing the 1919 version, then the 1969 Urban Redevelopment Law, and the 1970 Building Standards Law. These weren't designed to reinvent Tokyo, but to tame and fine-tune what had already emerged. The 1968 Act was the most foundational. It's the framework for modern Tokyo. Everything that's come after it is just more or less fine-tuning. While much went into it, the establishment of these 12 zones are the most visible legacy. They're essentially 12 categories of land use, each with its own rules for what can be built, how big, what activities, and so on. One being the most restricted to almost homes only, to 12 being the least. What makes this system exceptional is that it's hierarchical and inclusive. Each higher
Now we're
category
getting
allows
some
all
big
users
volume
to
to the
build
top
on it.
here.
This is what makes Tokyo such a mixed-use city, whereas if you compare it to New York City, which is still definitely walkable, they divide the city into hundreds of zoning districts, strictly separating residential, commercial, and industrial functions. Mixed-use development is technically possible, but it's often hindered by bureaucratic procedures. Meanwhile, London's story is totally different. They operate on a case-by-case planning system, which technically allows for maximum flexibility, but introduces significant unpredictability because of the negotiations involved in getting things approved. Tokyo is just much simpler. According to data from Tokyo's Bureau of General Affairs, from 1957 to 2009, non-incorporated individual landowners have built more floor space than large-scale corporate developers and the government combined. One other major part of it was that for the first time, Tokyo divided land into two broad categories: urbanization promotion areas, where development was encouraged, and urbanization control areas, where construction was heavily restricted to preserve farmland and prevent urban sprawl. This helped Tokyo avoid the endless, disconnected suburbs seen in many Western cities. To understand why it was needed, I think this map paints a pretty good picture of it. Tokyo was rapidly growing. In fact, it still is even today, and it had to be properly managed before it spiraled out of control. This non-stop growth eventually led to a new, quiet transformation of Tokyo: decentralization. Tokyo was finally running out of room. Land prices were soaring, traffic congestion
So we
was
got
growing,
a
and the city's
small
core areas
little
like Marunouchi,
wedge
Ginza, and
forming.
Chiyoda had gotten to the point where they were too overwhelmed by the density. It wasn't some grand plan, but rather subtle. The metropolitan government started leaning much heavier into the idea of sub-cities, just like the planners during pre-war Tokyo had imagined decades ago. So they moved the Tokyo Metropolitan Government headquarters in Chiyoda to a new building in Shinjuku, with the purpose of making Shinjuku's identity as a fully legitimate co-equal core, not just a transit and shopping hub. Really, we can see this in each of Tokyo's wards, each representing a different part of the city. You have Shibuya, known as Tokyo's fashion and youth capital; Ginza, the upscale shopping and entertainment district; there's Asakusa, which is the traditional side of Tokyo; and Akihabara, the destination for all things electronic and anime lovers, just to name a few of them. As I said before, Tokyo is a constellation of many small places, each with their own internal logic, all of them interconnected to form a complex yet functioning whole. Now I want to shift to how Tokyo has handled housing, illustrating another reason why they're so different from any Western city. I'm almost repeating it at this point, but if you look at this graph, you'll see Tokyo has consistently built way more housing than any other major cities since 1970. Obviously this comes down to the permissive zoning, but still, even during the 90s, when Japan was in the midst of their last decade financial crisis, they were building more homes than all of the Western cities which were flourishing. Even now, as Tokyo's population is peaking, home prices have remained relatively stable, especially compared to cities like San Francisco, Sydney, and
So we're rejecting the high of the day.
Of shortages and affordability trends, but never a true housing crisis in the Western sense. Finally, we can't talk about the modern developments of Tokyo without mentioning its adaptation to natural disasters. See, Japan as a country seems to always be caught up in some of the most intense natural disasters due to its geographical location, being the only country known.
We're still just stuck here within this 2,000 pip range. Got NQ rejecting perp. We got US30 rejecting the high of the day. I don't know what price wants to do, but until price breaks out of this area, I'm not doing a damn thing.
But there was the 1948 Fukui.
Earthquake, the 1959 Typhoon Vera, the 1995 Great Hanshin Earthquake, and 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, just to name a few of them. Thousands dead, cities ruined, and billions worth of damages. Naturally, how Japan responds to these disasters filters down into how all of their cities are built. The idea of reconstruction isn't the exception, but the expectation. There's a culture of depreciation there. Buildings, especially homes, depreciate rapidly in value, often reaching zero value within 30 to 40 years. It's literally written into their tax laws. Only the land itself retains value, so homeowners focus on owning the land rather than preserving the home, even if it's structurally fine. As a result, older homes quickly become outdated, and since remodeling is so expensive, many just rebuild it. Meanwhile, in the US or Europe, older homes actually retain or even appreciate in value. Buyers value charm, craftsmanship, and historic character. Unless it's falling apart, a house is rarely seen as disposable. Part of this cultural difference is because of how earthquake-prone Japan is, that building codes are frequently updated to reflect stricter seismic safety standards, making homes quickly outdated. This creates a cycle of poor maintenance due to the lack of any incentive to make homes marketable for sale. But what this provides is a market where the homeowners feel more liberation to design homes as they want, while simultaneously accepting their negative equity. In fact, Japan has a way higher number of registered architects per capita than many nations, due to the need for newly built custom homes. This trend is changing though. But the other part of this is philosophical. Traditional Japanese culture embraces the idea that everything is impermanent, a Buddhist concept known as mujo. Rebuilding isn't seen as loss, but renewal. It's natural. The best example of this tradition is found in the cyclical destruction and reconstruction of the Grand Shrine of Ise, Japan's most sacred Shinto structure. Every 20 years, the shrine buildings are destroyed and reconstructed as a way of preserving traditional ways of building and passing on that knowledge to the next generation. This all plays into why so much of Tokyo looks futuristic and super modern. It's always being updated. Speaking of their culture, the Japanese teach their children to clean up not just after themselves, but after their community from a very young age. There's a culture of dignity
Get this
around
pushed
their
down now.
and it's reflected in how the city feels, too. A megacity of 37 million people that feels cleaner than towns with a few thousand. What this has all led to is Tokyo now being the third most powerful city in the world, which is an extremely impressive feat given the circumstances. While Tokyo dominates Japan as its primate city, it's not yet managed to be the financial center of Asia the way New York is for America and London is for Europe. Hong Kong has that spot. Nor has Tokyo become a massive hotbed of entrepreneurship like Silicon Valley. Singapore has that position in Asia. Instead, Tokyo today is like what Paris was a century ago, a city of captivation, atmosphere, and identity. To many, this makes it the best city in the world. Thank you for watching. The US government is quietly reshaping the global economy in ways that will change our world forever. You can see this in just one sentence from Joe Biden's first address to Congress.
Think about it. There's simply no reason why the blades for wind turbines can't be built in Pittsburgh instead of Beijing. No reason. No reason. None.
This seems just like a boring political
Heading down to the law of the day.
Because it marks a new era in our global system, a system that all of us participate in, whether we know it or not. Or maybe it's a rerun of an economic system that the globe turned to right before the Second World War.
There's no reason why American workers can't lead the world in production of electric vehicles and batteries. There's no reason. That is the passion.
In this video, I want to peek under the hood of the endlessly complex and fascinating global economy, to show you just how deeply connected we want to become, and how those connections are being cut and weaponized. All of this thanks to new threats, new risks, new realizations, new values, and above all, a new rivalry between two great powers. This is the world that we are moving into. It's how things will work for decades to come, and it's important that we understand it. So let me give you an overview of what is becoming the new global economy.
The new tariffs from both sides went into effect early this morning.
The U.S. tariffs have kicked in. China can't put as many tariffs on us as we can put on them.
China is still the biggest threat to the United States.
Folks, we need to make these chips right here in America.
Okay, so for a long time, I've been at war with marketers, people who call my phone even though I don't want them to, and who send me emails even though I never gave them my email address. We're all
Come on. We're gonna move away from perp. So we still got some support through this area. Still stuck in this little level area. I'm gonna give this day till 8 o'clock. If price doesn't make a move out of this area, I'm gonna call it a day. I'm not gonna force anything on a Friday. I'm up real nice. Yesterday made a big move, so if today we decide to range, so be it. Price hasn't made a move out of this area from 630. Don't force anything. Do not force anything. No, I trade. I mean, if they're moving the same, if Nas and US30 move the same, it's nice. Oh, give me a second. If they move the same, it's nice. It's not like it's a requirement, but they both are separate assets, so they're not always going to be moving in the same direction. I had considered getting in for the sell-off. On Nas, I considered the sell-off at 725, but I don't like that we have these two levels here in the low of the day, so I said no. And then US30 is still back into this little 630 open range, so I was like, no. And that's my only reasoning with not jumping into anything right now. US30 looks like it wants to head up, but here's what I'm always playing out, right? I'm playing out the one or two entries that I should or am looking for, and I ask myself, if those two have already happened and there's no real good entry, then I probably should be done for the day, you know? Because, you know, like this hammer here, the hammer at 740, 720 was really the only thing I considered. I considered getting in for the buy, but then I looked previous high, and then I looked gold zone, and I was like, okay, well, I don't really want to get into that because it's too close. And then I looked at everything else after that. There was this right here, what is this, 735? I considered that, but wick to the bottom, that same opening range, and I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. I'd rather take it if we got a clean break out of that area. That kind of puts me at where we're at right now. So 640 was nice too to the bottom, but what are we running into? The low of the day. So really all we're stuck in between right now is the low of the day and the high of the day from before 630 open. So 455's candle, and then all of this level down over here at, I don't know, 430, 230, and 12 o'clock. All 2 hours apart. Yeah, like nothing there. And if that's the case, then that's already about 2 entries. So I'm thinking in my head, if I took those 2 entries and they were wrong, that would be my back-to-back, and that would be my indicator to stop trading. And remember, if you look at the days that are really good and easy, they're not set up like today with Asia and London. Right? Look at yesterday's movement. Asia London was sideways. Straight sideways. Shot up during the end of London. Gave us the rejection off the top, R3, and then dropped. If I was on, I would have already been guaranteed looking for a sell-off. Knowing that we're at R3, guarantee. R3 and heavily overbought, guarantee I would have been in that bitch to the bottom. So once again, if there is very little movement during Asia London, there tends to be a lot of movement during New York. And yes, it's not a whole lot of movement for Asia London today, but it really was. Relative to the movement, it's actually a lot. It's about 2,000-3,000 pips. Boom, 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 boom. There's just volatility during Asia and London. And now we got this, range during New York. Makes sense on a Friday. So if there's any day that I'm willing to not take an entry, it'd be a day when it moved a lot during Asia and London. But to your question, Chris, no. I'm not necessarily looking for them to trade in the same direction. If they do, great. If they don't, great. They're separate indices. Because right now, we do know, like for both indices, if we look at US30, we know once again, high of the day, low of the day. That is what we're ranging in. Fact. So what is the solution? wait for price to break the high or the low. Same thing with NAS. If you're looking at NAS's high of the day, basically 630 in that area, which is also the high of Asia and London, basically. So it's a strong area of resistance. And then we have the established low, which is like 2:30 a.m. on NAS, and that is exactly where price just ran down to. So if you imagine, it's both indices are moving with the same personality today. They both ran down to the low of the day. They both supported off of it. They both rejected the high of the day. So really, right, if I have to make an executive decision, I'm done for the day. I'm done for the day, no entry. Because the only entries would be if you played within the range. If you took a sell off the high, if you took a buy off the low, that's the only way you possibly could have made some money today. But I'm not fucking around with that on a Friday. And more importantly, I would rather wait for a day like yesterday. I would rather wait for a day like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like literally all those days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, easy winners. Friday, it is what it is. Even if you took an entry and you were wrong here, you should be still positive for the week, because the week was good. 4 days out of 5 days were winners. Not to say, I mean, today's a winner too. I'm not taking an entry, so if I'm thinking about my ratio for this week, I've won 3 days, I've skipped 2. So really I've only had 3 trading days. My 3 trading days alone netted me over $4,000. That's a winner, right? Regardless on how things played out, the reality is 4 days out of the 5 days of movement were easy. So if that is, even if we just take that ratio every single week for the rest of our lives, that means we're gonna be winners, right? You guys, make sure you guys are doing the math in your head so that you can build confidence in what we're doing. Because literally, you know, yes, I didn't take yesterday, but it's only because I wasn't on. If I was on, I would have taken it. So in my head, I'd count 4 days out of 5 profiting days. Friday is a wash, no entry. We're always looking for that range, that wedge, where price is going to move. Will break through, right? The established areas that price will possibly be ranging. And even right now, like, you know, if you're looking at NAS is respecting perp. If price respects perp, we would be considering taking that down, right? The shady part is, well, we're still in this range. Asia and London. We're still in the range of Asia and London. I mean, if you were to jump in this to the downside, you know, as if price heads down to the low of the day, well, yeah, you could possibly, there's little room for you to move stop loss into profit, you know, but is it worth the risk? To me, no, right? It would have been a better risk to take this 725 candle down and then move stop loss into profit as we hit that level. Other than that, hell no. And here's the thing, we don't know, right? We don't know if it is going to go back down to the low and bounce up. We don't know if it's going to go to the low of the day and shoot down, right? All we can do is make an educated decision and live with it. And right now, the educated decision would be to not place any entries. If you stay on today and you wait for price to break the low or the high, I think it would be a waste of time, but that's just how I look at it, right? If I look at the past days this week, there's always opportunity between 6:30 and 8:30 to make money. You know, even yesterday's entry, what, 7:45, 7:55, 7:55, 8 o'clock, 8:35, you're already down at the next gold zone. You're done for the day. So whatever's going on, it's not average, right? We like average movement. We like average shit. Trading is the only thing where we want average. Why average? Because average is consistent. Average is reliable. We can rely on this to happen. Today, not average. But alrighty guys, it is 8 a.m. There was no movement outside of this range. I'm going to call it a day. I've taken 0 entries. I've lost 0 money. That is a winner in my book. So remember, not taking an entry is a win. Losing money is the only way that you can lose. So, anybody have any questions? No questions from Ruben. Enjoy your day, Ruben. Nobody else has any questions for me. I'm gonna jump off because I need to get a whole bunch of shit done today, and I am gonna go north. I'm gonna go north. I'm gonna mosey on north of Oregon. So, alright, I'll take that moment of silence as nobody has any questions. Once again, if you guys are going to stay on, there is no entry until it breaks the low or the high of any of these indices, US30 or NOS. You know, and once again, remember, yesterday we had 10,000-ish pip drop. So, the charts blew its load. The chart blew its load, and it's done for the week. That's how I look at it. I'm at least 2 or 3 round kind of guy, but you know, the chart blew its load yesterday. It's done. It's got no more in him. He's tapping out. Alrighty guys, I will catch you guys Monday. Let's hope for some average days come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday again, and let's smash some money. So, and remember, if you let one day fuck up your entire week, you gotta look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, what the fuck? Because one day should not fuck you guys up. Alright guys, I will catch you guys Monday. Laters everybody.